All right, so we're doing this packet from Lev Binyamin. Binyamin was actually a boy that prayed next to me when I was in 11th grade. 11th grade. And then 12th grade, Sukkot, he was a 10th grader, 11th grader. And in 12th grade, we'd come back from Sukkot, and I noticed the guy who was supposed to pray right next to me was not there. Turns out that he was crossing the street with his family on Sukkot, the second day or the first day of Sukkot. And there was a drunk driver who ran him over in front of his entire family. They were crossing at a normal stoplight on the right time. They were doing everything okay. And it turns out that when they arrested him, he had just been released a week earlier for drunk driving. He was served time and was released, and then a week later he killed his boy. It's a very special boy. Binyamin should be Lilu Nishmato B'ezrat Hashem. We did was we took Tractate Kiddushin. That was the Gemara we were learning that year. And everyone took a page or a certain topic from the Talmud, and we expounded on it. So I was very interested in discovering a little bit more about the concept of Kisui Rosh, of a head covering kippot. The origin of kippot comes from the Talmud and Tractate Kiddushin. Kiddushin is a tractate all about marriage, but as you know, our rabbis don't just speak about one topic. When it is, they speak about the Talmud, and they throw in all kinds of ideas. And one of the ideas that's thrown in is this idea of head covering. The style of his article, since I at the time was in a Lithuanian yeshiva,
Head covering is a lady's
meaning a man's head covering. Yes, you're right, it's a good point. The style of writing at the time was a little bit more in the pilpul fashion, which is a little bit more back and forth, hold one concept, go back to a different concept, come back. I, Baruch Hashem, have simplified my style of writing since then, but then that was the style, so bear with me. Binyan, on the topic of kisui harosh, of head covering.
You have this one?
Yeah.
We're on this one.
Right here. Binyan kisui harosh, on the topic of head covering. On page Lamed Aleph, if you go to Gemara Kedushin 31a, you will find that head covering is mentioned, as I bring down. In the paragraph on the right-hand side. Ita is Aramaic for katuv, it is written. Ita b'Gemara, it's written in the Gemara. B'Masechet Kiddushin, in Tractate Kiddushin. And this is the quote. Rav Huna, Braid Rav Yehoshua, Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, said the following: Lo misgei, a person should not walk. Misgei is Aramaic for lalechet, for walking. A person should not walk. Arba amot, 4 amot. Bigilui harosh, with a out a head covering.
talked about 4 amos is 6 feet.
What?
4 amos is 6 feet.
Yeah, that's what we said, right? 18 inches per amma, so times 4, that was 6 feet. Thank you. Amar, he said, the reason for this, finally, Shechina, the divine presence, Lemala Miroshi, is above my head. End quote. So the Talmud tells the first time we hear about a head covering, Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, says a person should not walk 4 amot without a head covering, as a person should always be aware that the Shechina is above my head, meaning there's something above me. It seems to denote maybe humility, maybe to remember that a constant presence of Hashem. Yeah.
I remember I went to camp and that's what it said.
That's why we wear kippah.
Like Hashem.
So the source is from this piece of Talmud. V'chadome b'Masechet Shabbat, and I am writing. Similarly, we find in Masechet Shabbat, in Kuf Yuched, page 118b, comes back Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna, Breder Rav Ashi. Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, says the following. Teitili, how you translate Teitili, I don't have an exact Hebrew or English translation, but Teitili is somewhere along the lines of praiseworthy am I, or how great am I? Delo sagina, that I do not walk. Dal amot, 4 amot, begilui harosh, with my head uncovered. V'chen, and I'm continuing again, Sham the Kaman, we also find later on, where is later on? In Tractate, I just quoted Tractate Shabbat, so again, Tractate Shabbat. Shekatuv, it's written there, Shehanizhar lechasot rosho, Hanizhar, one who is careful, lechasot rosho, to cover his head, yeah? Yeh emat shamayim alav, will have fear of heaven on him. V'nitzol min ha'avera, and he will be saved from doing an avera. So here he says, later on, the Talmud tells us that one who wears a kippah will always have yirat shamayim on him, and he will distance himself from doing averot. It seems to be some kind of protection, a segula, something along those lines, yeah? And so we've seen 3 pieces of Talmud so far about the kippah. The first one says, Rav Huna says, that a person should not walk 4 amot without a kippah. The second one, he seems to show how special he is that he doesn't walk 4 amot without a kippah. And the third piece of Talmud tells us, it keeps you from doing averot and having fear of heaven when a person wears a kippah. So we continue. Supar sham, and it's told over there in the Talmud. Al Chacham, about a certain rabbi, Shenolad, who was born, Lihiyot, to become
A thief.
a ganav, a thief, betivo, in his nature. There are people who are born with different natures, different leanings towards certain things. This Chacham was originally born to become a thief. That was his yearning, that was his passion in life, was to steal. And clearly his mother was a tzaddiket, she knew. V'haita imo, and his mother, mishamrato, she would watch over him, kshaya katan, when he was young. Upam achat, v'amar lo, kaseh roshcha, she tells him, kaseh roshcha, cover your head, kedei, in order shetiheh alecha emat shamayim, so there should be fear of heaven on you.
Emat shamayim instead of yirat.
Right, Ema and Yira are both interchangeable. Ema is more awe. Upamachat, and once, Haruach, the wind, Hipila, knocked off et hakisui merosho, the covering from his head. V'nichshal be'avera shel gneva, and he succumbed to the avera of stealing. But once his kippah got knocked off, and he stole.
What happened?
Once his kippah got knocked off, one time the wind knocked off his kippah, and he ended up stealing from somebody. So what do we see here? This seems to validate the idea that kippah is really some kind of protection. It keeps you in line spiritually. V'raiti, and I saw, shenemar, that it says, b'masechet Kala Rabti Perek Bet, in the tractate Kala Rabti, the greater tractate Kala, in the 2nd chapter.
What is?
It's a tractate of Mishnah in the back of the Talmud. There are 2 halves. There's Kala Rabti and the smaller one. And in parentheses, Huva b'manhig, it's brought down in the book called the Manhig Hilchot Chol, Siman Memhein, chapter 45. Sham gale rosho, that one who uncovers his head. Yesh bekach azut kufa. He has blatant brazenness, meaning like a very sharp kind of brazenness.
Wait. One who
Uncovers his head.
uncovers it.
It's like a high level of brazenness, of chutzpah.
Oh, okay.
Umasen, there's a story told there. Shehayuz kenim, that the elderly rabbis, Yoshvim, were sitting down, they were learning together. Ve'avru lifnehem shnei tinokot, and 2 babies walked by them, I mean 2 children. 2 very young children. And one of them was not wearing a kippah. Ve'amar Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva said, Al zeh, about the child, shegilat rosho, which uncovered his head, shehu mamzer, that he's an illegitimate child, born out of an illegitimate relationship, uben nida, while his mother was a nida. I mean, two separate things. One, he's a mamzer, and also while she was a nida. V'achen batku, so the rabbis they looked into the matter, umatzu, and they find out, sheken haya kidvarav, that was the truth. That he was a mamzer, and he was the son of a nida.
What does it? I mean, it doesn't always happen like that. It's just a baby.
Meaning, this kid was a kid, so Rabbi Akiva sees into his actions that he's not doing it right, he's a baby, what do you expect from him? He's a kid. But the fact that he did it showed something about his spiritual status, of uncovering his head. Right? Now, I'm not going to say every kid in the world I see uncovering his head, oh, he's a mamzer, the son of a nida. Rabbi Akiva knew people better than we did. But this was a sign to him that this child, there was something wrong in his background. Yeah.
Wait, but like a mamzer, it isn't his fault. So what? Like is a mamzer like excommunicated? Like what happens to one?
No, a mamzer can become a huge Talmid Chacham. If you have a mamzer, the child who's born out of illegitimate relationship, it doesn't mean someone who's born out of wedlock, meaning they had a child without being married. That's not a mamzer. The child, people, Jews, they don't know the definitions of words. The child is not a mamzer. Somebody who is with his wife when she's a nida, that's asur, it's forbidden, it's asur karet, it's spiritually excommunication. But the baby is not a mamzer. He's in the status of a ben hanida. Mamzer is in the parasha that we read on Yom Kippurim. The relationships that are forbidden, be that between siblings, be that between parents and children, be that between that child is not a mamzer. He's a halal. He's not a kohen, but he's a kosher Jew for everything else. Or a married woman who cheats on her husband. That baby would be a mamzer. These children are never able to marry into the Jewish people until 10 generations have passed.
Wow, 10 generations. Huh?
But that's considered to be like infinity, though, right? Some people say like 10 equals like.
Could be.
Nobody tracks that.
Well, you figured if you didn't have a connection with the Jewish people, that unless you have a mamzer community, you would kind of disappear.
Well, mamzerim can marry each other.
Right.
There are other people, perhaps, that mamzerim can marry, not for the scope of this class right now, but in general, mamzer doesn't marry a Jew, and it's the hardest halakha in the world. The person didn't do anything wrong.
Today.
A lot.
Back to kippot. If I can ask this for you, tzniut, associating with people who you're not married to, be them family members, be not children. Children are not you're not worried about your children, but even then, there's an age at which children you're close with them and you can hug them and kiss them, but not. The kids grow up and they deserve their own space. Also, there's a limit. People have to be intelligent about these things. But to take tzniut seriously, it's not a joke. It's not a game. It's not the right thing to be lenient about. I'd rather I could give you a list of things to be lenient about. But there are some things you have to be very careful about. Because the world, especially the world around us, is very, very submerged in it. And we're not immune to it. We're actually very prone to it. So as it says, but, the second paragraph, Einenu chozim, our eyes see, Besugyatenu kan, in our Talmud here, in which tractate? Kiddushin. Yeah, the first tractate. Where Rav Huna says, what does Rav Huna say? The top line, what does he say? Not all at once? A person should not walk 4 amot without a head covering, right?
Right.
So, he said, we see in our sugya, kan, in our section of Talmud, Shelo ne'emar hadavar, this halakha was not said, B'isur gamur, as a outright prohibition. It doesn't say asur, it's forbidden to walk 4 amot without a kippah. Rather, what does it say? You should not walk. Who else used the same language? Where do we see that?
The Maran.
Maran the Shulchan, very nice. Maran the Shulchan Aruch, he said a person should not walk. He's forbidden to walk with a straight posture, meaning with an arrogant posture, but he should not walk without a kippah. And then suddenly in the halakha bura, you see that he's already starting to be lenient because a kippah is not as strict as being arrogant. But we didn't understand where that came from. Here you're understanding something now. you go back to the source and you'll see that it wasn't said as an outright prohibition. V'nitan lehavin, and it's possible to understand shezohi midat chasidut be'alma. This is just a midat chasidut, a extra level of piety, to wear a kippah. Kach mashma, it also is apparent this way, mima shemuva, from what is mentioned, ba'otzar ha-geonim kan, in the collected writings of the geonim, in this topic. She'inyan halicha, this idea of walking begilui harosh, with a revealed head, or better yet, with a covered head, Nimna is counted ben asarat dvarim, among the 10 things shenahagu bahem Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi v'Rav, that both Rabbi Yehuda the prince and the Rav were accustomed to do. They were accustomed to walk with a covered head. When you praise somebody, remember we had this by something else, or we praise the person. Remember we had this piece? We learned it at my brother's house. When you praise someone for doing something, what are you saying about what it is that they're doing?
That's something more than
I
necessary.
mean, it's not necessary, because if it was necessary, should I praise you for it?
No, you're just doing what you need.
Oh, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai kept Shabbat. Good for him.
You put out tefillin.
Of course he kept Shabbat. When you say Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai never did X, Y, or Z, because that was already something extra pious. Not something you have to do, something he did. So if we're praising Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Rav, there's 10 special things they never did. They never walked without a head covering. What does that tell you about head covering?
That's unnecessary.
That it's not necessary, it's an extra level of piety. And this is what's understood from the Geonim as well. The kulam nechshavim, these things are all considered limile, as words of the chasidut, of extra piety. Yes.
If kippot are on a lesser level than tzitzit, like not saying that they're not important, then why do they like care more about them at like school than like giving them one of those like tzitzit that you just like put over your clothes?
I don't understand the question.
Because like at school, like they find a boy without a kippah, chas v'chalila, go put on a kippah, principal's office, all that.
Okay.
But they see a boy without tzitzis, which is pretty much everyone except for me and Jerome.
They don't what?
Like they don't give them one of those like cheap tzitzis that they put over the clothes.
It's more expensive to hand out tzitzit.
Hand out good.
It's more expensive to hand out tzitzit.
Quality tzitzit at least.
Yeah, but if
It's you have to ask the school why their policy is what their policy is. It's a good question. It's a good question. You should ask them.
Shulchan
Go
Aruch,
for it.
you know?
But if you're going to ask on graduation day.
June 17th.
After final.
Kach nira, this is also apparent. Gam, also the top of the page on the left. Midivrei hasugya le'el, from another page of Talmud above, Daf Chet, which is page 8. Al Rav Kahana, the Gemara there speaks about Rav Kahana, not Rav Meir Kahana, Rav Kahana from the Talmud. Shehaya mitatef besudar, who would wrap his head around with a scarf. The style of the Baba Sali. If you ever saw the Baba Sali, he had a scarf that he wrapped around.
yeah.
He had a fez, and then he wrapped his head with a scarf.
Right,
Many rabbis did such a thing.
right.
Kevan shenichshav legavra rabba. Kevan, because shenichshav, he was considered a gavra rabba, a great man. Umishum kach, and therefore, eino holech, he does not walk begilui harosh, with a revealed head. Ayin yud yud shin means ayin sham. Look at the topic over there. I mean, what do we see also about Rav Kahana? It seems to say, the Talmud says that he wore a scarf on top of his head because he was. What was that? Because he was a Gavra Rabbi, he was a very important person. Meaning, if you're not such an important person, do you have to cover your head? No, that's what would be apparent. That would be apparent from these pieces of Talmud until now. And then I conclude, Uvezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help, Navi kama v'chama mideot harishonim. We will bring a number of opinions from the Rishonim, from the medieval rabbis, b'inyan zeh, in this matter. Who's better to start with than the Rambam? Who's better to start with than the Rambam? Moreinu HaRambam, our teacher, the Rambam, Behilchot Deot, in his laws of Deot. Perek Hey, Halacha Vav, chapter 5, the 6th Halacha. Katav, he writes, V'zeh lishono, and this is his exact language. Tzniut, Gdola, and a great level of modesty. Nohagim Talmidei Chachamim Ba'atzman. Are Torah scholars accustomed to themselves? I mean, Torah scholars act with themselves with a high level of modesty. What's one of the things that Torah scholars do that's modest, says the Rambam? Velo yitgalu roshan. They do not reveal their heads. They do not sit bareheaded. Didn't say sit. They don't go about bareheaded. V'chule, etc. Ayin Shaim, we should look there. Rambam lists a number of things that Torah scholars do to be modest, and one of them is they do not walk with a revealed head. Again, what does this come to strengthen? Which point?
Why that's not necessary, something extra.
Because who is doing this?
Talmidei Chachamim.
Torah scholars.
Revealed head means completely covering the hair.
At a first glance, you're right. Eli, you're right. We're going to get to different opinions as to what these mean. But for right now, let's assume that it's referring to, it's a very good point, a completely revealed head. Uvemara Nevuchim, the Rambam again says something similar in the Mora Nevuchim, in his Guide to the Perplexed, Chelek Gimel, the third section, Perek Nun Bet, the 52nd chapter. If some of you have these books at home, you should go look them up. Go see inside the sources. Binyan ha'alicha, when he's speaking about walking bekomaz skufa, with an arrogant posture. Mitzayen sham harambam, the Rambam writes there, Ugdolei chachamenu, the greatest among our scholars, hayun nimnaim, they were careful milegalot rosham, from uncovering their heads. The reason being, lihiyot hashchina, so the shchina could be mechofefet, hovering al ha'adam, on a mechofefet means covering a person, al ha'adam, a person, u'misochechet oto, and actually, hovering over him, radiating around him. It says the Rambam seems to say again, what? A kippah is only what is the Rambam telling us? A kippah is only
Extra.
the runs. Oh, that extra level of piety. But what am I doing? What am I trying to do with
Is
this
he
so far?
saying a kippah is, or is he bringing out the example of Gedolim who cover a lot more than a kippah?
He seems, every time he mentions head covering the Rambam, it's always in the context of Torah scholars are careful not to uncover their head. Meaning, other people are not.
Didn't Rambam wear that big hat?
He was a Torah scholar. I'm not convinced the picture they have of the Rambam is the Rambam. I don't know who found it.
And like the Chafetz Chaim picture, it's not also.
Right, the Chavetz Chaim picture is not the Chavetz Chaim, for those of you who know.
Well, the depictions of him, I think he was like the no.
What, really?
Yeah.
The famous Chavetz Chaim picture, the daughter of the Chavetz Chaim came over to America. I mean, she lived in the United States. And she said that was not her father. She said that was actually, if I'm not mistaken, don't catch me on the... It was the water carrier
Yeah.
from... Right, and when they came to ask them, I was like, oh, whose picture? We want to paint your picture. Why do you paint? Go paint his picture. He's also inside it. And we have 2 photographs of the Chavetz Chaim. I had them in a book. I saw once in a library in Baltimore. 2 black and white photos of the Chavetz Chaim. He wore a simple, like a casquette, like Eli's wearing. Yeah, and that was it. He didn't dress with special hats or robes or clothing of a rabbi. He looked like another guy who lived in Radin in Poland. This whole picture of the guy with perot and the big white beard, that wasn't the Chavetz Chaim. But it's already become the image of the Chavetz Chaim, so much so, the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation uses that picture as the Chavetz Chaim, even though that's not him. Even though it's not him. But they have a number of rabbis. Chabad, for example, they have pictures of 5 of the 7 rabbis.
Yeah, they don't know.
And 2 of them, they don't know what they look like. But they know one of them was very large. That's what they know about him. That was recorded in their books. So, if you can imagine, that's what he looked like. How do we know what these people look like? They have photos that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. How do you know what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked like? But they claim that they have a tradition. This is how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked. Okay. I remember I went to visit my brother once in Washington Heights, and he lived in, if you know Washington Heights, the very Dominican neighborhood, very devout religious people. And I was walking up the doors, and I noticed everyone had a picture of Yeshu on their door.
Right.
But everyone had a different skin color. One was white,
Yeah.
one was Latino. There was a black Yeshu. He was black. And the one through, so how do you know what he looked like? The only thing they got in common was that he was wearing underwear and he was hanging from a cross. That's what they got in common. Everything else, they didn't.
Sometimes they had blondish hair, sometimes blue eyes, sometimes brown eyes.
Right, you don't know what.
Sometimes fairly dark, sometimes light.
In America, they always depict him as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person.
Right.
Maybe he was really a mamzer. Who knows? Because not in the Middle East of then.
Anybody Middle East.
Yes.
Makes some sense.
So
Holland, yeah.
the Rambam always puts in context kippah with
Talmidei
Talmidei Chamim. So that's what we understand.
It may make make you not
Well, yeah, there are
ways-
ways.
Putting it on doesn't make you, but it seems to be something that's like part of the clothing that Talmidei Chamim wear. Hatur. Who's the tur?
the Ashkenazi.
He is from Ashkenaz.
The three rabbis
He-
that the majority was taken from.
His father was the Rush. Very nice. He wrote the first Shulchan Aruch, the Tur Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, which Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote a commentary on, the Beit Yosef, and then wrote his Shulchan Aruch in the same style. Hatur Katav, the Tur writes Behil Chotav in his halachot in Siman Chet in section 8 of the Shulchan Aruch. Beseder Atifat HaTalit, in the order of how to put on your talit. He writes, remember someone asked me last week, where else does it mention covering your head in the Shulchan Aruch? Like, why is he going on a tangent now? It says in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Tur Shulchan Aruch, Umechaseh et rosho, he should cover his head. Shelo yeheh begilui harosh, so that he will not be with his head uncovered.
Okay.
Meaning, when do you cover your head for the first time in the morning?
Talit, like hoodies.
When you wear your talit. That seems to be what the Torah is saying.
Before you put a kippah on.
Now, so far, what you're noticing is you are dealing with original Jewish history versus revisionist Jewish history, in which everybody you know is depicted wearing a kippah and a shtreimel. Yeah? It's not true. At least not according to the sources we've seen so far. Let's keep going. V'trumat hadeshen, also one of the Rishonim, Mevila halacha, he quotes in halacha, it's actual halacha. Shalom matzinu, we have not found sheyeh din zeh, that this halacha should be begeder isur muchlat. That this is not an actual halacha that's prohibited to go around with a bare head. And in parentheses he adds, V'af lo bezman kriyat shema, not even when you're saying shema.
Really?
According to the Trumat Hadeshen.
So that,
Someone can say Shema in Hashem's name in Elokeinu without a head cover.
so that means also like you can cover chomek.
At least according to the Trumat Hadeshen.
you can learn Torah.
It's not done. I agree with you, Baruch Hashem.
But it
But
could be
we have to start somewhere. And what we're doing right now, I'm walking you through a classic approach of you start with a piece of Talmud and you track down the sources until you're going to end up where we are today.
You're like, if according to Trumat Hadeshen, you could learn Torah without a kippah.
So he's not so
Because
clear.
like Shema, when you say Shema, it's like very high.
We're going to see there's an entirely different approach as to how you view everything we just said. Can we do 2 more paragraphs? Sure. Lu'umat zot. On the other hand, Katuv b'Sefer Chasidim. It's written in the book of Rabbi Yehuda HaChasid, the Sefer Chasidim, Siman Nun Gimel, in the 53rd section there. We're still in the times of the Rishonim, right? The early comment, the rabbis. He writes, "V'lo yelech, a person should not go begilui rosh, with a revealed head, mipnei mora shchina, because of the fear of the shchina, the awareness of the shchina." Mashma milshono, you see in his language, shekatav velo. He uses the word you should not. Velo chilek, and he doesn't seem to say that there are sometimes you must and sometimes you don't need to.
Here, the topic of head covering, according to whom this we are reading?
What?
Who is the author of it?
Me. Yeah. That's why we're reading it. So he's mashma. It's apparent. This is me. It's apparent milshano from his language. Shekatav velo. He uses the word velo. Velo chilek, and he doesn't differentiate there. Sometimes you need to. Sometimes you don't need to. Sheledato, that according to the Sefer Chasidim, zehu isur gamur. This is an actual prohibition. You are not allowed to walk bareheaded. This is the first time we find one of the Rishonim who seems to mention kippah, a blanket statement. You are not allowed to walk with your head revealed because of the presence of the Shekhinah.
So is it presence of the Shekhinah or fear of the Shekhinah?
So the Talmud uses the word fear of the Shekhinah. Here he also says morah, the fear of the Shekhinah. All these words, morah, yira.
Morah get to be fear. Is that what fear? I thought fear was.
With a hey, morah is a teacher. With an aleph, morah is another root of yira.
That's a good analog. The fear.
Fear and the teacher.
Yeah.
The difference is one letter. Yeah.
Hamarah shel hamarah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That very good. V'chayotze b'zeh, similarly, Muva, it's brought down b'sheilot v'tshuvot in the book of question and answers of the Mahari Barona, one of the early rabbis.
This is Italy.
Could be, yeah. V'ledato, in his opinion, listen to what he's saying now. Kisui harosh, the head covering, ha'amur, which was mentioned basugyot, in the tractates of Talmud Shehuval, which we mentioned. I mean, every time we've mentioned head covering so far in the Talmud, according to the Mahari Barona, hu kisui nosaf. This is an extra head covering, meaning a secondary head covering.
It's like a hat.
Umiyuchad, and specific, meaning it's like a special head covering. Velo ha-kisui ha-pashut, not the simple head covering, haragil etzed kol adam, etzed kulam, which is found by everybody.
So this would be a source for like wearing a hat, like a black hat.
So you could use it that way, but I'm using it a different way. You're right. What's the Mahari Barona saying? Everybody wears
Keep on.
a kippah. Only the special ones wore
Another.
another head covering that showed that they were Torah scholars or great people. In reality, this was true. You find many countries where only rabbis wore certain hats, and everyone else didn't, as we mentioned before. But according to the Mahari Barona, you find not only does everyone have to wear a kippah, but rather all the pieces of Talmud we've seen so far, when they say a revealed head, they don't mean a revealed head completely, rather they mean
Not.
Completely covered.
a second covering.
Yeah.
I mean, it's revealed, so it doesn't have an extra covering on it. Tell me what you're thinking. Say it.
I don't know. Why didn't it say that? I mean,
It's a little bit of a stretch.
It's a little hard to believe.
I mean, he's kind of saying something that's yeah, okay, that's nice for me to hear. It makes my conscience feel better that I wasn't lied to all of my day school life.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite fit with the way we've seen the Talmud speak until now. Agree?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So he's not done. Milvadze, aside from this, Katav, he wrote Sham, over there, Sheyesh lefaresh et ha'amur besugyatenu, that you can explain what was written in our Talmud Rav Huna, that Rav Huna braid the Rav Yehoshua, the son of Rav Yehoshua, turned to the top of the backside of this page. Lo haya holech begilui harosh. He did not walk with a revealed head. Afilu betoch habayit. What does that mean? Even inside of his house.
So that means that you
Oh,
should
again,
do it with
you're reading
outside.
into something that's not so obvious. That which we praise Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, that he had always walked with a head covering, he was coming to include that even in his house he walked with a head
So that
covering.
means
But outside of his house,
Extra.
everybody walks with a head covering, obviously. Obviously, right? That's how you would understand it if you saw the Talmud. But this is not a new thing. Very often now, rabbis hold that we have a tradition as to how to read this piece of Talmud. And this is how you read it. But you find that the Mahari Barona is the first one to read into the Talmud like this. Uvesiman Kuf Lamedalid, and in his book, in section 134, Hu Kotev, he writes, she'isur hahalicha, that the prohibition of walking begilui harosh, with an uncovered head. Listen to this. It's not because of fear of heaven. He gives a different reason, right? This is the second reason. Hu kidei, this is an order, shelo lilech b'chukot hagoy,
Not like a nun.
that he should not walk in the manner that a non-Jew walks. The non-Jews don't cover their head. But Jews cover their heads, and therefore we have an obligation to dress differently. And part of that dress is that we cover our heads even though they do not. Tell me now, do you remember Chacham David Yosef in the Halacha Bura? What's the reason he gave for why, even if you had a custom from the countries you came from not to wear a kippah, today you have to wear a kippah? What reason did he give us?
This same reason.
Assume that religious Jews went.
For the same reason, we have to differentiate ourselves from other people who are not Jewish or don't fear heaven. What is his source? Tell me what his source is now.
Yes.
This. But he seems to be dabbling on both sides of the fence, because on one side he agrees with the Rambam and the Tur that head covering is only really a extra piety. On the other hand, he seems to say that it's necessary because you're not allowed to look like the ways of a non-Jew dresses.
Unless, of course, you live in a Muslim country.
What happens then? Right? This is a good question.
There you're being derech eretz.
Do you understand what we're doing here?
Yeah.
We're going to the Rishonim, and we're now putting everything we've learned in context.
Diving away.
There are people who say that halakha is boring. Because they open up a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and it says, do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
Why did you skip telling us how you got to this conclusion? You know how fascinating it is? On the other hand, think about it. The conclusion of all these pages is going to be whether or not you wear a kippah. That's one halakha out of thousands of halachot you need to learn. If you were to learn halakha like this, you would never finish.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the time you would know how to keep Shabbat, you would already not have to keep Shabbat anymore. It's something a person has to think about. And therefore it's necessary to have books that help us get a broader picture. But it does not exempt us from delving into the depths of halakha.
Well, this is very similar to the whole thing of the Tzedeket in the Talmud. It says that the beams of her house never saw her uncovered head.
Very nice.
And then people draw from that the thing of women's head coverings.
Well, we didn't learn from there women's head covering. That's not the source for ladies' head covering.
Because that's all I ever heard about it, in Chabad books, things like that. But they never saw the hair of her head.
So that's not, you're right, but it's not the source for ladies' head covering.
Okay.
I don't know the source is much better if you know the source, but it's not the source for ladies' head covering. The source is from the Sota,
The Sota, right.
where it says that we uncover her
her
hair.
hair, right.
So, okay, it's a different discussion for a different time. What it means, uncovered, how you get to that conclusion from the word that Torah uses, and so on and so forth. But that story about the lady, the walls in the house never saw my head uncovered. According to the logic we used earlier, what does that tell you? Does a lady have to cover her head inside of her house if it's just her and her family?
No.
No.
They're very pious.
No, unless she wants to be pious. And it seems to be that most Jewish ladies who cover their hair do follow this idea of covering their head inside their house. My grandmother, Aleh Shalom, would change her head covering under her blanket.
If somebody comes, you open the door.
Change your
you
head
put it
cover.
on.
When she changed her scarf, she would go under the blanket and do it.
Really?
All right.
Never in front of her walls, never in anybody else. I don't know why we reach
You
such...
can't hide from Hashem.
Hashem's not looking. He's not the one we're worried about, you know? One more paragraph. You had something to ask? No? Okay. Min hara'ui l'tzayen. It's proper, though, to point out, this is what I say, she'afilu le'ele mirabotenu, even among those of our rabbis harishonim, from the times of the Rishonim, hasovrim, which are of the opinion, shekisui harosh, that head covering, eino ela mimidat chasidut, is only an extra level of piety. Even the rabbis who hold that head covering is an extra level of piety, ro'im isur min hadin, they see an actual halachic prohibition, lomar et shem Hashem, to say Hashem's name, or levarech, or to bless shum bracha, any bracha, begilui harosh, with an uncovered head. Those rabbis among the Rambam, the Tur, they all point out in the laws of blessing, the laws of talitot, the laws of tefillin, when you make a blessing, your head must be covered. Rather, they're only lenient in which regard? Yeah, like your standard day-to-day activity in your life. You're walking, you're working, you're sitting. That then they hold it's not necessary to wear a kippah. But everyone agrees that when you're saying Hashem's name or making a blessing, you have to have your head covered. V'zen, this is the opinion of HaKolbo. There's a book called the Kolbo. V'ha'or zarua. That's another Rishon. V'chein mashma ma'atur, and you're able to infer this from the writings of the Tur. The reason being, kevan, because sheyesh bekach, that in this matter of saying Hashem's name with a revealed head, yesh bekach kalut rosh. There's a lightheadedness that comes along with it. You're not taking Hashem's name seriously. You're not taking Hashem's name seriously. Shemaskir Shem Shamayim, that he's mentioning Hashem's name, below ema vira, without any fear or trepidation. Ukmoken, and similarly, asurim kol hadvarim shebekdusha, all of the things that you do that are holy in nature, kagon kriya b'Torah, like reading Torah, ukriyat Shema, and reading Shema, all of those things are prohibited unless a person's head is covered. Uchaet, and now, navi kama v'chama, we will bring a number of mideot, of opinions of ha'achronim, of our later rabbis, b'siyata d'shmaya, with Hashem's help. Tomorrow, God willing, this is what we'll do.
So no one agrees with the Shumat of the Shaar.
I mean, it's so long what it seems to be right now that everyone agrees that at least when we're making berachot, you have to cover. So that's a good question. Whether Shumat Adeshin, he seems to say, right? So that's a good question. We have to look into that. But what's apparently the halakha is, even though there are those who say, some Rishonim say it's an extra level of piety to cover your head. Some say no, it's a mandatory halakha. Just the extra head covering, that's what is necessary as a level of piety, but everything else is actually required. According to everyone, though, they agree that when you say Hashem's name, when you make a brachot, when you pray, you have to have your head covered. And therefore, we will continue, God willing. Tomorrow, we'll go through the world of the Achronim. We're not done with the Rishonim. What we're going to do now is two things. The next two steps. We're going to go through the Achronim who pick apart the Rishonim. There are two kinds of Achronim. There are those who come to conclusions, those are the poskim. And then those who are the mafarshim, the commentaries, they first pick apart the Rishonim, and based on those people, the poskim make their decisions. So we have three categories: the Rishonim, the Achronim who pick apart the Rishonim, and then the Achronim who made a decision based on the Achronim who picked apart the Rishonim, who understood the Gemara. That's the way it works. That's what we're going to do, God willing, tomorrow.